Language is essentially used as a form of expression and means of communication among the members of society. Did you know, based on the year 2022, there are 7,151 languages spoken in the world. Papua New Guinea alone has the most languages, with over 800 languages, whereas Indonesia comes second with over 700 languages. Although it is no surprise that English is the most spoken language globally, as it is spoken in 146 countries to date, from the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes settlement in Britain during the 5th century, colonial influence of the British Empire, and globalization, the English language has a long history. And of course, with the reputation of being the universal language of diplomacy, academic, conferences, business, commerce and tourism, comes with a variety of language ideologies, and one of it is the myth of language ownership. Before we kick off in this video, we will have a look into understanding the myth, the harmful effects of the myth to English language teaching (ELT), looking into alternative stance, practical measures that we can take to facilitate change or raise awareness to debunk the myth, and lastly, what can you do to make a change? It seems natural to wonder, who owns English? It is probably logical thinking to suggest England as the legitimate owner of Standard English due to its nature of origin and practice, as once perceived by ex-Prime Ministers Gordon Brown and Boris Johnson. Gordon Brown stated in 2008, "For Britain, this is not a matter of narrow national pride. It is in part an accident of history, a wave of knowledge and commerce, which gathered even greater global force in the post-war era that gave the world the English language." So I want Britain to make a new gift to the world, pledging to help and support anyone, whatever their circumstances, to have access to the tools they need to learn or to teach English. English is our heritage, but it is also becoming the common future of human commerce and communication. Whereas Boris Johnson stated on 2009, so what is it then? What is the supreme gift of the English to the rest of the world? The answer, dear reader, is under your nose. But if there is one thing that marks us out and defines us, it is the language. The greatest, the most fertile, and the most stunningly successful language the world has ever seen. Similar remarks were made by him in 2019. The most important priority for immigrants should be to and to feel British, he said, and to learn English. In English language teaching, scholars recognize this ideology termed as native speakerism, which is the idea that native speakers are the best models and teachers of English and of the methodology for teaching it. This brings us to the important relationship among language, identity, and the ownership of English between native and non-native speakers of English. The impact of native speakerism can be seen in many aspects of professional life, from employment policy to the representation of language. An underlying theme is the excluding of students and colleagues from outside the English-speaking West according to cultural stereotypes. The exclusion of teachers who are labeled as non-native speakers therefore face cultural disbelief, not believing in their ability to teach English within the Western context. The association of the non-native speaker labeled with deficiency is also deeply rooted within a wider and equally mistaken Western perception that people from non-Western cultural background are unable to be critical and self-determined. Native speakerism is also cultural racism on two occasions. First, race is implied in the non-native speaker teachers. It is now established within critical sociology that any description of other cultures that defines and predicts how people are going to behave is in fact racist. Culture thus becomes a synonym for race. Indeed, the persistence of native speakerism resides in it being hidden beneath an apparently inclusive and nice professional veneer that celebrates cultural difference. Native speakers are therefore likely to naively convince themselves that they are protecting non-native speakers from having to do what native speakers are able to do. This mirrors a wider West as steward discourse in which the West assumes the patronizing role of looking after the non-West. Second, racism in native speakerism is evident in the discriminatory employment practices that go far beyond the English-speaking West, where all types of language teaching institutions and their students commonly show a preference for native speaker teachers. Accordingly, it has become increasingly obvious that this marketing of native speaker teachers is less to do with language and more to do with an association with whiteness. This is implicit in job advertisements that specify teachers from Center English-speaking countries. In such an environment where native speakerism is dominant, especially within a neoliberal climate, citing native speaker teachers becomes a false marker of quality. As English goes through an inevitable change from the conventional and standardized use of English, linguists are also moving away from the ideology of this myth where the expanding circle community of English speakers utilizes English language in their own particular society and even call for authority over English. World English's view highlights the authenticity of diverse varieties of English, which are created by non-natives as functionally independent and real. According to Henry Widdowson, a well-known linguist, you are proficient in a language to the extent that you possess it. Make it your own, bend it to your will, assert yourself through it rather than simply submit to the dictates of its form. Another linguist known, Kurt Kohn, aspires to spread awareness and advocate on My English, making English as your own. Owning a house is one thing, however, making it one's home is yet another. If non-native speakers accept ownership, they also need to begin to feel responsible for themselves. Before being able to shape the future of English, they need to get their own English into shape. But which direction should they take? The undoing of native speakerism requires a type of thinking that promotes new relationships. Native speakerism needs to be addressed at the level of the prejudices embedded in everyday practice, and that dominant professional discourses must be put aside if the meanings and realities of students and colleagues from outside the English-speaking West are to be understood. In non-native teachers to owning up their own values, there is research on identity and the ownership of English in the context of debates on non-native English teachers demands innovative approaches to classroom pedagogy, teacher education and language policy, as well as theories of language teacher identity. It is by claiming the identity of a bilingual/multilingual teacher equipped with diverse linguistic capital that the non-native English teachers can assert their professional legitimacy and value. In the teacher's role in the classroom, however, there are more recent research also suggests that it is more productive to focus on classroom practices and student learning than the native tongue of the English teacher. The English teacher may need to develop classroom practices that promote student ownership of the English language and enhance the range of identities available to language learners. To the extent that English language learners are invested in the teacher's pedagogy and classroom practices, the legitimacy of the English teacher will be enhanced, whether the teacher is a native or a non-native. If you are an inspiring English teacher yourself or a public member of the society who would like to be a part of debunking the myth and learn more about world Englishes and English as a lingua franca, there are multiple online references to get started with. Firstly, what is English as a lingua franca? An introduction to the field. Second of all, this video may also help perceive your new opinions, world Englishes, and investigation of international students' schools and experiences. You can also enroll to the Challenging Englishes online course that is great in providing fresh thinking on how English is used globally. That is all from me. Thank you for listening in and hope you have a good debunking day.